Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today we're going to document the Epiphone BB King Lucille in a cool custom color that was only available for the other side of the world. So while we get it out of the box, let's have some history. BB King, one of the most famous blues musicians of all time. He had a very iconic sound, he was slick with the string changes, and he was known for his Lucille. Now, Lucille was not actually any particular guitar, that's just what he called all of his guitars. And starting in the 80s, Gibson actually made him a signature model called a Lucille. But did you know, the original Lucille was actually an L30 archtop, and it got that name because a club that he used to play would heat the wooden house with a barrel full of kerosene lit on fire. And one day, a fight broke out between two guys and that barrel got knocked over. The whole place burned down. BB ran back in to save his guitar and he named it Lucille after the namesake lady who was being fought over, to remind him to never do something so stupid again. But today we're going to check out the new Epiphone Lucille. Now, Epiphone has been making Lucilles for quite some time, but there was recently a lull in production, and then in late 2021 they finally brought these things back, and it was in the black finish. However, today, what is this? Bone white? That's right, how about this for a custom color? Now, it's not like we haven't had white Lucilles before, and I'm not even sure if there was an Epiphone one. I mean, there are so many Lucille models out there, it's hard to keep track, to be honest. My favorite has to be the Gem series, though. They've got some cool colors there. But a straight up stark bone white. This was a exclusive finish for the European market and Japan, and it was introduced mid-2022, so you had to wait around for this. Now, the US side actually got a transparent cherry finish, so if that's more your style, hey, congratulations, you can get one of those in the US. When the cherry ones were first released, Sweetwater told me that they were making 300 of them, so I would assume there were about 300 of these bone white ones made as well. So that's actually a really small number for an Epiphone model. But again, the regular one that's always available is ebony. And surprisingly, Epiphone did not charge a premium for these. It's the same price as the other ones at $949, which is kind of expensive for an Epiphone, but these things are absolutely blinged out. Let's talk about some of these specs. We've got a fancy TP6 tailpiece, which, if you don't know, it's a fine-tuning tailpiece, but it's not because we have like a Floyd Rose locking nut system here. The original reason behind a TP6 is A, it can make string changes a little bit easier. That's how BB King was able to pull off that really cool string change real quick. And B, these were designed if you were playing a really cool jazzy chord and you think, oh, something's just a little bit out of tune. On the fly, while you're playing, you can actually make that adjustment instead of going to the top of your headstock there. A few other interesting things to know about are our Veritone system on here. So each individual pickup selection, you can have 5 different tones on. Now, you're eventually going to settle on 1 or 2 that are your favorite, but the options are all there for bridge, middle, and neck pickups. It's based on an ES355, so that means we have things like the block inlays, the ebony fretboard, the binding along our headstock, and obviously we've got Lucille on the peg head and the new Epiphone headstock style here, which makes it new for this time. And it's just a really fancy blinged out, bound everywhere version of a 355, but if you're a big tinkerer or modder, this is what makes these things interesting. They actually have a backplate cut out of them. Most 330 style instruments, they don't, because they have the F-holes, they wire them up through the wiring channels and those holes. So if you like to change out pickups and whatnot, it's a lot easier to get yourself one of these if you don't mind having Lucille on your headstock. So first impressions here, it's actually a pretty chunky guitar. The neck feels pretty heavy on this one. We'll have to see if it balances perfectly on a strap or not. The bone white finish is quite striking on this thing. We had just recently documented the Epiphone Jerry Cantrell that was done up in the same finish. So when this was a new Guitar Day / forwarding purchase of someone, I knew exactly what we were expecting with this thing. I mean, it's just a great striking white finish here. And since this is a poly finish, it's not actually going to age. So if you hate how white Gibsons turn that kind of yellowy faded color after a couple of years, you're not gonna have to worry about that on this. So it looks like at the price point, they are including a hard shell case. This is what they consider the Epi-Lite case. So it's kind of like a combination of a hard shell case and a soft shell case. They're pretty nice. It's got 2 zippers that you use to open and close it. You've got a pouch out here, and they give you some Epiphone swag in there. And hey, look at that Japanese case candy. That's cool. The interior just looks like this. You've got a single neck block in there. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't look like any COAs or anything on these guys. And obviously, to get one of these things back from Japan, it's going to be a lot more expensive than the $949. But hey, again, somebody new Guitar Day purchased this one and used my international forwarding service to get this one to the US. And he said, hey, why don't you document it while it's here? So it's like, all right, let's check out this Epiphone Lucille on the workbench. Inside the Epiphone Lucille, let's take a look at our pickups here. These are known as the Alnico Classic Pro pickups. That's what ACP stands for there. We've had them in other guitars, and I thought they were alright pickups. Inside, you can see your QR code. It reads BB King BW for bone white. And then you've got your serial number up here. Then inside our bridge pickup cavity, it actually continues onto the cavity of the guitar. And I believe these have something to do with the baritone that are all screwed in there. But what's interesting is they only actually use one screw. And from the factory, it actually wasn't screwed in at all, so I had to help them a little bit right there. But you can see the other one right here. It's also only secured by one, so maybe they're doing some cost savings there by only doing one screw rather than all of them. But here you can see how they create these with a maple poplar maple sandwich, and then they have a spruce bracing right here before you get to your maple center block. And then you have another spruce on the other side of that. Gibson ES style instruments are just a whole bunch of different sandwich woods together, but they look pretty nice. Now we actually have a stereo and mono output jack on this, so you can have some fun with that, but our bridge pickup reads 7.76 k ohms, our neck is 7.5, and the middle for fun 3.87. Then we've got the bridge. It's your regular Epiphone lock tone style. And now the sweet TP6 tailpiece. I was really wanting to check one of these things out so I could compare it to an original one. It actually has a really good weight to it. You can tell it's a little bit blockier in style as compared to the original Gibson one, but it's not too far off. But the back actually reads Epiphone, so you don't have to worry about somebody taking one of these off and trying to sell it separately. But I did notice when I got this straight out of the factory box that they had this all the way screwed down, which that's not going to help you unless you need to loosen the tension. So I would suggest if you buy one of these, make sure it's at the halfway point. That way you can go up and down, because they have just this much travel room in them before they start to fall out. I was quite impressed with this pickguard. I mean, they actually had to custom bind it. I just figured it'd be like some sort of a cheap printed material, but no, this actually looks like a really nice faux celluloid pickguard here with the whole tortoiseshell look. Now the only downside is they marked the back of it with like 6Z or whatever it means to them. I mean, these are made in China, so it might be a different language. But if you happen to be looking at it in the light or something, you can actually see that through the pickguard. It's like, thanks guys. So if you know that you're looking for it, you can still kind of see it in regular lighting situations, but you really have to know it's there for that. As far as our controls, 3-way toggle switch, 2 volumes, 2 tones like normal. Then we've got our baritone switch. Now I could tell you what these are doing and putting different things within the circuit, but I mean, it's just easier to do a tone sample for you guys, I think. But it's got 6 different tone settings. Now the one thing about Epiphone pure white guitars is you're either going to love this or hate it, but Epiphone's binding is actually kind of like a creamy white color, so if you're looking for that pure white guitar, no, you've got like a bone colored binding, which works with the whole bone white color finish, right? And if you really get up on their case, you can tell where the finish is like covering the binding a little bit in certain areas. It's never 100% perfect, but it's not too bad either. Good example of that is like right here. There's definitely a sharp ledge. But not having F-holes, really interesting look on these things. I mean, they're giant guitars, but not having the F-holes just makes them seem even bigger. Now we can move on to our mahogany neck with an ebony fretboard. We've got the acrylic block inlays on this one, and you can see your little side markers there. We've got those medium jumbo frets with a 12-inch fretboard radius, 24 3/4-inch scale length with a nut that measures 1.69 inches, then increases to 2.1 by the 12th. First fret neck depth 0.82 and 0.97 by the 12th. It's advertised as a rounded C neck shape, and that seems to match with those numbers. Now, despite that description, it's got a pretty flat back, but definitely still C-shaped. But it doesn't quite have the same amount of shoulder to it as compared to like some of the D-shaped Epiphone necks, so if you hate those, it's similar territory, but it's a little bit more comfortable than that in my opinion. And the headstock itself, we saw it earlier, but it reads Lucille in a pearloid material, as well as the Epiphone logo and new headstock style. Our truss rod cover is brass and reads BB King. Looks pretty good for an Epiphone model. Now before we flip over to the backside, I wanted to go over a few QC things. It's got your typical Epiphone scratchy frets, so they probably could use a good polishing. However, they're far from the worst Epiphone frets that I've ever seen, so this is about what I would expect out of an Epiphone. It looks like while they were filing the frets, they like gouged the binding a little bit right there. It's not a big deal, but something I noticed. And the paint got kind of bunched up on the side right there, but to be fair, A lot of Gibsons are like that too. Normally happens when they're painting the side of the neck and whatnot. Otherwise, nothing too glaring. Now we can move on to the back. This is where things get interesting. You can't normally see inside these style of instruments. Well, without an endoscope anyways. So here we can see the baritone switch, whatever they're using there. That's pretty interesting. Then they actually do have CTS pots in here, so that is a nice upgrade. You're not going to have to worry about messing with this stuff. Because let's be real here, you don't want to mess with this stuff. Stereo and mono output jacks. Oh my goodness, do you guys see that? It's a flamed maple core right there. That's ridiculous flaming. That's a shame that you can't normally see that. But here you can see that spruce bracing we were talking about, the maple core, and then more spruce bracing up there. Then you can see the kerfing along the edges as well. So you have that at the top and the back. Now opening this up, smells like you're in a Menards. All the raw lumber. Looks like Mark W, probably for the white finish maybe. And you can tell the white finish kind of got bunched up right here, so it makes the route look sloppy, especially when you have the cover on, but I think it's technically correct. Other than that, just a beautiful unmarked back. Similar paint issues as we were talking about on the front. I mean, that's a very stark line. This is an unforgiving finish, so making it look perfect, definitely tricky. Then we've got the back side of the neck. Nice pure white. You've got your inspection little sticker right here, handcrafted in China. Then you have regular Grover tuners on this one. That would have been cool had these came stock with locking Grovers, because then it'd be even quicker to do string changes. And your serial number is there if you get it in the light. All said and done, this one weighs 8 pounds, 13.4 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this one sounds. All right, pro tip. This is the output jack you want if you want to play it like normal. It's the furthest one away from you, because I sat down with this thing, I was playing the bridge pickup a bit, then switched to the neck to get the juicy BB tones. But it wasn't working, so after tearing the guitar apart again, I was like, oh man, I can't believe I forgot this thing has stereo output if you want it. But we're just going to demo the pickups. We'll mess with the baritone later. It's just set at 1 for this. So far for Epiphone pickups, I've got to say, pleasantly surprised. I mean, it's a BB guitar. Of course, the neck pickup's going to be nice and juicy. So for the baritone, I'm just going to play around with it, go from 1 all the way down to 6, and we're just going to start with the neck pickup. Basically, it goes from full down to very thin. But the kind of in-betweens give you some interesting tones to them. Kind of reminds me of Out of Phase, but a little bit different. I find myself liking position 4. It's got a really glassy tone to it. And of course you can also do that with the bridge. I'll just quickly get through that. Again, I really like that 4th one. And we'll do the same thing with the middle position. Yeah, so for me, it's all about 4 and 1. Everything else, I wouldn't probably use all that often. And then it doesn't really feel right to use distortion and crunch on a guitar like this, but hey, it wouldn't be a demo if I didn't. Once again, that 4 position. Kind of reminds me of Jazz Master pickups in a roundabout way. It's kind of cool. Now that we know all about the new Epiphone BB King Lucille, what are my final thoughts on this thing? Honestly, very surprised. I wasn't really expecting to like this guitar necessarily, but hey, that baritone, at least 1 and 4 sounds really good. So if I could just get like an A-B between those, that'd be pretty sweet. But at the same time, I mean, you've got the options. You can do whatever you want with it. It's a really chunky feeling guitar. It is a little bit neck heavy, but once it's on a strap and you have it where it needs to be, I didn't notice any like actual falling. So you don't have to worry too much about that, but I do find myself having to kind of support the neck. I don't need to tell you guys just how beautiful this thing is. I mean, the bone white finish works excellently with this guitar. I definitely like it more so than just the pure ebony, but I guess it just depends what you saw BB playing or if you're like collecting all the different examples. So I'm really glad I was able to document something that was a little bit more special than just the run-of-the-mill black version. However, the USA limited edition cherry finish, what's cool about that is you're actually going to be able to see the wood grain underneath it. It's not just a solid red like I was initially thinking. So Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed checking out the Epiphone BB King Lucille, the 2021/2022 edition, and we will catch you guys tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.